Hey YouTube, so this is a little mini garden tour. So far what I've harvested and what is yet to be harvested, and I'll just give you a little look into the progress of this garden. So these are the sunflowers that had been growing earlier, and now they are in seed production mode and have so far not been eaten by the deer. Beside my sunflowers, I had planted zucchini, and I forgot how big these guys get. They are probably my best producers, I would say. I planted what I thought was green zucchini squash, but ended up with quite a few. This is the green one, this is a yellow one right beside it. I ended up with quite a few of these yellow zucchini squash as well, which is fine because they are processed exactly the same way, taste the same way once you cut back the skin. I see here that this zucchini plant is quite a ways off from my other zucchinis, and this planted by itself, I'm not sure how it was seeded over here, but it's grown quite nicely underneath my tripod for my beans. And here you can see one of the sunflowers. It did get to flower. I got to see the flowering of it, but the deer have come along and eaten it. I have a few stray corns here, but I don't think anything much is going to come of it. I've left them here anyway, but I don't really see anything coming along out of it. So going down this side here, I've got some beans growing. I believe most of these down here are mung beans. It's possible that some of these are Romano beans that have not produced anything. These are Romano beans that did produce beans and pods. You can see here. The pods are quite nice and pretty because they have speckled colors to them. The Romano beans are also called cranberry beans. I think it has something to do with the color. And the beans themselves are speckled as well. Here, side by side, is 2 fresh pods and 1 that's dried out here. You can see the difference in color as it dries out. And when it's at this stage, you can process them and take out open the pod and take out the beans to continue drying out, or they're pretty much dried out at this point for keeping for next year or for cooking in a pot, when you do a pot of beans. These ones can be eaten fresh. This bean originally is from Colombia, and the Italians have seemed to really like this and taken it over, and they like to eat it this way, fresh, boiled, and then steamed or boiled for a few minutes, and then fried with olive oil and garlic. So maybe I might try that with a few of these, but for the most part, the ones I have here, because this is my only little bush that has produced them, and when they grow this way, they all produce at the same time. So I know I'm not going to get any more out of this little bush here. What I was thinking is that I'll probably keep most of these for seed for next year and just try a couple of them for eating. These are scarlet runners, and I sowed these ones a little later in the season as compared to these ones. These ones have produced a good amount. I've had a big, huge bowl of these scarlet runner beans already, and there's still some producing. You can see here a few of them that are in the growing process. And around here on the other side, I've got a few growing. These actually taste really good. It's my first time eating them. Last year, there was a time where I grew them and they ended up just mostly being for flowers. But this year produced quite a few. Online it says you can't eat them once they get past a certain size. I only harvested mine when they were almost double this size. And they were way too tough to just boil and eat whole. But what I did was I ate the beans that were very good with butter and salt. And the inside, though, of these pods, even though they were a little too tough on the outside to chew up, you could eat the inside the way that you might eat artichokes if you're familiar. You just kind of use your teeth and skim the inside of it. And so I've given the really big scarlet runner beans the nickname of poor man's artichokes, and they were delicious. I ate a whole bunch of them the same way that I would eat artichokes. They were really good. But I will still harvest these ones when they get to more of a little bit bigger than this, but not quite so big that they're too tough to eat on the outside. And they can also be saved for seed as well, which I've done. I will do on these. They suggest to leave the ones you're going to grow for seed until the very end of the season, so that's what I'll do. Leave a few on this vine for harvesting for seed. I did end up with a few watermelons. They're called sugar baby watermelons. I've got about 3 or 4 of them left. Yeah, I've got one here hiding under my trellis, and one here. And this is my hand beside it. They're not quite as big as those huge ones you see at the grocery store, but they are still sweet. We've processed one already and eaten it. Really good. And the seeds from it were saved for next year. I had quite a bit of lettuce. This is my only one that's going to seed that has survived the deer. You can see here the flowers are just about to come out, and then they will produce seed for next year. So I'm going to hold on to those for next year. And when it comes to lettuce that's gone to seed, you can still process these and just taste them as you go. They tend to be, people say that they're bitter and not good for eating, but if you cut them and taste them, some of them are actually still tender and taste good. So I've got a lot of lettuce that still tastes very good, and I just cut it as I go. But in terms of lettuce that I've produced for this year, we've had at least 3 weeks of fresh salad every single day by growing it in this wide row here of first red. And then I grew quite a bit more of green, and they're both romaine lettuce. Romaine lettuce tends to have the most nutrients out of lettuce, so that's why I grew that type. I grew them in wide rows because when they're at the prime, now it's a bit drying out, but when they're in their full swing, when they're sown in wide rows, come and cut again, where you just cut up the top without cutting the center of the plant. You just cut across the top of it, maybe an inch from the center, and just cut across. So you can take sections of your garden, and each section becomes like a bowl of salad, and just keep going down the line till you get to the end. And by the time you get to the end, the idea is that this side will have grown enough to start again. And the second section of this row is mostly carrots. You can see they go all the way down that way. And these carrots are mixed. It's a mixed bag when it comes to carrot production here. Like here you can see, I think you can see some carrots just hiding out in there. And if I were to pull one of these up, let's say this one, it's no big deal because it really just makes room for the others. This one is a really nice size one. But I definitely have my share of these puny little baby ones that have, I would say, belong in the class of baby carrots. So like you can see compared here, I pulled a few out earlier just to show you the differences in sizes. So I've got a few baby carrots and a few decent sized carrots here. But it is still a pretty long row from here down all the way, like I said. And what I'm hoping to do is keep a small section over winter. And because I think they're biennial for seeding, they will come back next year if I protect this little section maybe over here. And they will flower and seed next year. So I will keep these till next year, this small little section. And behind it, I've got this corn that has grown pretty nicely. The first row is popcorn and the second row is sweet corn. So you can see here the first row of popcorn, the tassels come out a different color from, see this, how nice and deep maroon almost these tassels are, versus the sweet corn at the back, the tassels on them are golden. So you can kind of identify the difference between the two just by that. The popcorn, I don't see any ears growing or forming. Although popcorn I think is probably closer to 100 days to produce. And the sweet corn is going to be a little bit shorter in time for growing. I think it's about 70 days or so to harvest. So I've got the sweet corn here. Here's an example with the ears starting to grow and get bigger and bigger. Most of these are growing at least 1 ear of corn on each stalk. So I guess it's not bad. I don't know. I've never grown corn to its complete fullness before, so we'll see what happens here. What is funny is the transplants that I had put. See this one on there, one on there. I'm not sure if my transplants, because they were spaced further apart, but these are the corns that I had transplanted earlier, if anybody saw that video, and they are doing better than the ones that I planted originally. They actually have each 2 ears of corn on 2 out of the 3. So you can see here, there's 2 ears growing side by side here, 1, 2. And so they're coming along quite nicely. Actually, if I'm not mistaken, yeah, this is the 3rd one growing on, you see that? The 3rd one? It's growing on this one corn stalk. So these ones are coming along nicely. So this row here, I would say is almost a write-off because it was just so rocky. Right here, this is about 7 or 8 feet of garden that really didn't do anything. In front of it, it grew quite a bit of kale, so I'm happy about that. And so this was supposed to be, the whole bed was supposed to be kale and beets. And so I ended up with a little bit of kale at the front, and a few beets here ended up surviving and growing. You can see this nice little beet getting pretty big right there, which is nice. And these ones didn't do quite so well, but they are growing. Nothing was coming out of the onions or beets that I had sown earlier. Just a few weeks back, I decided to re-sow some lettuce. So this lettuce will hopefully grow and give us a few more salads for before the winter comes in. This, I am not sure what this is. I'm pretty sure this is a type of flower that grows that you can use the flowers for tea. This is kohlrabi. I've never grown or eaten it before, but I thought it would be nice. It's pretty decent. It says about 50 days to harvest, and I sowed these seeds about 4 weeks ago, I believe. So we'll see what happens here. I just thought I would put something there because this whole area was barren. I had a sweet potato that was going to vine itself in my cupboard that I found, so I put it in the ground. So we'll just see what happens. I don't expect anything of this because I sowed it way too late. Sweet potatoes need a good long hot season, which I don't expect to happen here in New Brunswick, but I threw it in the ground anyways. This is my small patch of potatoes, and I think I will go a lot bigger next year with potatoes because they're great for eating. I was pulling weeds the other day and 3 of them came out, so I know for sure there's 3 potatoes in here, but I'll wait till the end of fall to harvest those. Hopefully there'll be big potatoes under there. And these are my onions. I planted as onion sets. Now onion sets is like, comes in a box. They're probably about this size, a box of, I think there was probably about 75 of these. Smaller than this actually, but close enough. Now this outer row didn't do that well, but the inner rows did a lot better. And so some of these look like full-on store-bought onions, and some of them just look like they didn't really quite make it all the way. We still have about a month left of the growing season for these onions, so we'll see what happens with them, but they're coming along. And I will probably triple my onion production next year. They can store for a long period of time too, so that's kind of nice. So that's that row. In this row here, this is the only thing I bought in terms of vegetables. These were on clearance for 50 cents. These are pepper plants. I have 3 of them here in this row, and the deer have completely eaten one of them, and nothing's come of them. I think they were just really bothered by the deer, which is surprising to me. I didn't think deer liked pepper. There was one fruit that grew from here. One pepper did grow, and I saw it on the ground like about 1.5 feet away from the plant, so I guess the deer might have tried to eat it. And I just picked it up and let it dry out and harvested the seeds for next year. And this here is Hascap berries. I don't know if you've heard of those. I've never tasted them, but I bought these. Hascap berries are kind of like a cross between, I want to say, a blueberry and a grape, maybe, from what people describe it as. But these are probably these are second year. And I put them in here. They're not doing super well. The deer have eaten them, and I think they have gotten a little bit of something on them, like some kind of disease. I don't know, but anyways, we'll see what happens with these. But I did buy those from a fruit store online and planted them here. They actually need a pollinator, so I planted them far apart from each other. And so this year I put peppers in between, but where these peppers are this year is where the pollinator Hascap berries will go next year. So going down this line is tomatoes called Amish paste. They're a lot like Roma tomatoes. They're coming along. I planted these late June, so they're coming along, and they've caught up really quickly to what, you know, other people have planted from months and months ago. They've caught up really quickly. I have about 14 tomato plants here. And so, assuming that they make it all the way and get red, I will have a good little supply of Amish paste tomatoes. I love them because they are very, very good for making tomato paste, and that's what I want to do. I prefer tomato paste in my cupboards. I can process them, and I can turn them into sauce if I want, but they take up less space, and so they're meatier. My husband planted these way back in February, and we transplanted this in the spring. Actually, we transplanted this outside in June alongside these ones that were seedlings. And you can see the difference in size. They've caught up to the one that was seeded all the way in February. But these ones are coming along nicely, and these are the normal tomatoes. They're a bit more watery, but they're great for sandwiches, and the Amish pastes are good for sandwiches as well, but these are the traditional tomatoes that are really great for fresh eating. And then there's also some cherry tomatoes that are starting to come along and redden here. And so, yeah, this row also had some kale. And these were peas. So I had a bunch of peas here, and I've just been pulling them up all together. And I did end up processing quite a few of them, some for eating and some for just seeds for next year. And I think these ones that are left, they're drying out. I'll keep these peas for soup. So, you know, the type of soup peas you see in a bag that are dried out, you can put them in any soup that you want. I'm just going to keep the rest of these here. You can see the pods that are drying out here. Okay, this one I call my wasteland row because it's the center row, and I didn't really get around to growing much here. A good part of the summer, this was just weeds, but I did get around at the last 3 weeks to getting rid of the weeds in this row, and then putting in some, so you can see there, kale. I put in some kale seedlings here, and here I had sunflower. And this morning when I came out to make the video, I noticed that most of these sunflowers have been eaten up by deer. So I'm not going to get anything out of these. The point of the sunflowers here wasn't really to get a bunch of true sunflowers. I didn't think the season would allow for it, but they say that when you plant sunflowers, it helps to pull up nutrients from deeper in the soil and bring them up to the surface. So I was more doing that for the health of the soil, to pull up some nutrients from the ground. So it's okay. I'm not like gonna cry over it. There's a couple of sunflowers left here that I will probably protect by putting some sort of covering over them so that the deer do not eat them, and see how tall they get before winter sets in. And I've got a bunch of kale here, which I love kale because it's good for fresh eating, but it's also good for dehydrating. And you can get like all these kale right here could probably fit in one jar once they're dehydrated and ground up into powder. Kale powder is excellent for smoothies, adding nutrients to your smoothies in the middle of winter. I've got more kale here growing down this row. I did plant some seedlings of broccoli. See how nice and big they're getting. I really had no hopes for them. They were doing miserably. And then sometime during the summer, they just took off with growth. I don't see any actual broccoli heads in there yet, but we'll see. We've got another month, so it might just work because broccoli likes cool weather, so they could probably, it's a possibility that they could produce. And even if they don't, the broccoli leaves right there that you see are just as edible and are pretty similar in taste to kale, apparently. So I will still process the leaves even if I don't end up with any actual broccoli heads. And the other thing in here that I planted late in the season is these are basil. So they call it lemon basil, but it tastes just like regular basil to me. And they are coming along slowly but surely. It's not really a loss if this doesn't grow to the height that I'm hoping for. It's still okay because I can process every one of these leaves, taste exactly like basil right now as is. So I don't really have to wait for them to get to full height to get a little bit of basil flavor into any of my cooking. So I'm hoping for the best, that they'll grow nice and tall, but even if they don't, I can just clip off all these leaves and dehydrate them for using in the winter if I want. So here in this row, I grew about, I want to say about 10 cucumber plants, and I'm not sure if they are still 10 cucumber plants growing here. You can see I ended up putting a trellis here, and they are growing up on them. You can see they're still flowering, so I may just get a good amount more of cucumbers still as they continue in some of the areas. But you can see the end of this one is still growing. You can see that vine on the tip of it here. Unfortunately, they're not all growing because the deer have come along and taken a few bites of quite a few of the tips of these cucumber plants. You can see one little baby cucumber, 2 cucumbers here. I don't know if you can see that growing. They're tiny. These are called pickling cucumbers or something like that. So they're more for pickles, but they are great for eating whole as regular cucumbers too. Like this one, you can see it gets pretty big. I have a few pictures I kept to show what they look like, but you can see here I've got, can you see that? I've got 3 humongous, look at that. Like this one, this is huge. Sometimes you see in the store pickles that they sell. They try to market these pickles in a package and it's like one giant pickle. Look at this. This is the type of pickles that they use when they do that. But you can see there's like a slug on there. But side note here is the grass that I've been putting down acts. You can see over here, it acts a lot like hay, and it keeps the vegetables nice and clean. Most areas in my garden are grassed up. This one I can see that it needs to be because you see the slug on there. The slug wouldn't be on there because the grass would keep it nice and dry and keep this mud away from the cucumbers. So I'm going to come back here and put some more grass I have set aside. But you can see here I've got quite a few cucumbers growing, and this is my first time growing cucumbers so abundantly, and I'm pretty happy about it. Yeah, this is butternut squash. You can grow them in different variations. I can probably put a note on the screen here of how I grew this one. I think it's like a mid-size or a mid-something type of butternut squash, but just in recent weeks, pretty exciting, butternut squash is growing here. You can see it. And they can grow a lot bigger, so I'm going to let these continue in their growth. And here is one baby one that's continuing in its growth. And I'm just going to let the vine keep going and see what I can get out of it. Here's the end of it here. And it just keeps growing and growing. I planted these about end of June, so they're doing really well. This one I'm very excited about because I never even heard of it till this year. They are a type of pumpkin that grows this way. You see how it looks a lot like a zucchini or something. It is a pumpkin. And what happens is in the fall when it's time to harvest this, you put it out, and once you cut it away from the vine and you put it to dry out in the sun, it will turn orange, which is pretty cool. Long ago, this pumpkin was grown here in Maine, next door to us, and pretty much the soil and the terrain is very similar. So I knew that this would grow well here because it's something that the natives grew quite a bit of. And I just like the idea of it because it has a good amount of seeds, but mostly flesh. And when you're processing pumpkins, you don't need tons and tons of that goopy, stringy stuff in the middle. This is kind of avoiding that. So I'm looking forward to seeing how this processes as pumpkins later on. I've got a few of them growing. There's one over there. And bigger one over here. And I'm just gonna let the vine continue. See, I've got peas growing here on this side and tomatoes on that side. And I'm just letting the vine continue on down the center here. So I'm letting the vine grow all the way to the end and continue growing out. So just in case, I might be able to get a few more pumpkins out of it. I have about 4 so far. On this side, I have really late blooming tomatoes. Like this was, I want to say beginning of August, and they've come a long way. So I'm hoping these tomatoes that I've put a few down the side here, down this bed to grow, I'm hoping that they get to produce something. The ones on the end you can see flowering. That means that, you know, maybe the fruit will come soon. And even if they get to green tomato status, I will be happy because I like green tomatoes. I've ever since that movie Fried Green Tomatoes, which I never even saw, but the title just told me about fried green tomatoes, and now I really like them. I tried them that year and they are really good. So I'm hoping that these late tomato plants will at least get to green tomato status. I'm not sure though, so we'll see. And I planted another zucchini plant very late in the season, like I think it was like the first week of August. So we'll see what happens here. If I get more zucchini, great, because I've learned ways to preserve them. So I don't mind too much zucchini. I know people say the big joke, I think, in the gardening community is throwing zucchinis in people's cars and leaving them on people's doorsteps, but I don't mind processing them and keeping them because they're actually really good. I love them. So here's another type of kale, and I don't remember the name of it, but it's coming along. There's a few little, see, a little bit bugs here, but the thing about it is you're not going to always have the perfect leaves like you do at the grocery store, but it's still fine. You know, if you wash it, make sure it's clean, free of bugs, it's still food. And the rest of this garden here is just peas. So that is my garden. And if you lasted till the end, I want to thank you so much for coming along and appreciate it. You're a superstar for listening to me ramble on all this time. And yeah, if anybody has any suggestions for me for my garden, or has any questions about what I've shown or any of these veggies or anything like that, feel free to ask or suggest in the comment section. And until next time, thank you for watching again, and God bless you. Oh look, you can see all the deer footprints here. Deer are like, they're so cute, but they are such a challenge in a kind of a country type setting. You can see here there's like 4 posts that look like that, and that's the outer part of this garden and a little bit beyond. But it's going to take some work to do that, but it's going to be a bigger fencing system next year. But for this year, it's just a matter of just getting over it and sharing with the deer so that we can all just get along together, and hopefully I get something and they get something. They've got a lot of somethings, but hopefully we've been kind of trying to get along together. They're very sneaky though. I never see them. They come under the cover of darkness. Thank you again for watching. God bless you. Hope you're having a wonderful day, and I will see you in the next